The Georgia Bulldogs got the best front seven in the country. And I'll give you one good reason why.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Brian Gebhardt. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. The Atlanta Football Party is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, who's the dog who's made history before the NFL season has even started? We'll talk about it in Next Up. And did any dogs make the all-transfer portal team? We'll go between the hedges to discuss. But first, let's begin with the front seven. So, Jarvis, Brian, it's our time for the Mykell moment. Woo!
Yes, let's go.
So CBS Sports has rated Georgia's front seven as the best in college football. Writer David Cobb cited Mykell as the main reason. Cobb said, quote, Mykell Williams is a potential first-round draft pick after 2 productive years on the edge. Also noted in the article, Williams will, of course, we know, play more outside linebacker this fall, which should set him up for a more productive junior season. So I ask you guys, JD, let's start with you. Is there a front that rivals this dog front?
No, absolutely not. Because when you think about having in short, no. But no, I think one of the things that, just really just stands out to me when you come to the roster, this roster and the makeup of it, right? I think there is something that to be said about a guy like Mykell Williams, because I was watching this video where Kirby Smart was talking about how you always hear offenses talking about putting the ball in the guys' hands, getting those guys touches in offenses nowadays, and they are really a concerted effort to make them to get the ball in their playmakers' hands. He said defense should be the same way, not necessarily getting them touches, but putting them in position to be able to be successful, right? And when you talk about lining up Mykell Williams where he's potentially standing up or he's coming out on that outside linebacker edge type guy, that is the best position for him to be in, right? Yes. He played some defensive end last season, so we're kind of floating between that and that outside linebacker edge spot. But I think Kirby Smart is spot on, right? Yeah, he getting the Jarvis stamp of approval. Okay, like he doesn't know what the heck he's doing, as a head coach. But I think that when you think about it and look at it and think about it from that standpoint of putting your guys in position to succeed, then you aren't surprised when, hey, this guy Mykell Williams, a top 10 pick. Hey, Mykell Williams is part of one of the stoutest, front sevens that Georgia has ever had, right? Because we know what those guys have brought to. When you got a guy like Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, you got a guy Joseph Jonah Ajanye, who I feel is going to be having an impact as well. When you start naming all those guys, and Warren Brinson, you have guys like that, who's a wily veteran, who's been around, who's seen it all, right? So when you talk about having those guys up front, and I ain't even got to linebackers yet. I probably let BG get into that. But when you talk about those defensive linemen, all those guys that I just named and the experience that they have and a potential first-round pick, and Mykell Williams, that's our Mykell Williams moment for today.
It feels so right. It feels so right to start this podcast off with Mykell Williams because somehow, some way, we didn't do it on purpose, but we didn't wind up talking about him at all last week. And we got off our podcast, and there was some sort of news related to him. I was like, wait, do we even get a chance to talk about Mykell today? So we're going to double down on it today and make sure. First off, I want to step into this quote that we had from David Cobb. Mykell Williams is a potential first-round pick. You can take out the potential part of it. He's the first-round pick. I think when we're having conversations about can this guy get to the number 1 pick, that's more the conversation that we're having when it comes to Mykell Williams. I mean, I would assume he's already locked into the top 15, if not higher, on most people's big boards for next year's draft. But One thing that really stuck out to me right there, what you were saying, Jarvis, was the fact of having a plan for players on defense. I think that's so important with Kirby and this defense and bringing in people and developing people, getting people to come back another year instead of going to the NFL. Like a lot of times with defenses, you can be, all right, come in. Yeah, you're going to be here. You're going to be our 3 technique. You're going to be our outside. Like you're going to line up here. You're going to play our defense. We're going to do it. No, I'm going to move you around. I'm going to get you in different spots. I'm going to highlight your skills. I'm going to get your tape together so you're ready to go. Now, it's going to all help us in the grand scheme of things. But I think that idea of we're going to come in, because we talk about it so much on offense. What are you going to do with me? Are you going to get my touches? If I'm a running back, am I going to catch the ball out of the backfield? Am I going to get the ball inside the 5? If my wide receiver, am I going to get the ball in 3rd and 3, 3rd and 5? But same thing goes for all those things on defense. And but to answer your question, Tenitra, no, there's no other team that rivals from the front 7 standpoint. And it's the combination. I know Jarvis spent his answer on the defensive line, but just the athleticism that we see at linebacker combined with what Jarvis had said about that defensive line. It's that whole package together where some teams have that defensive line. Some people have a couple of those linebackers, but I don't think everybody, another team has that full front 7 altogether like the Dogs do.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that you make, because I saw one thing in particular that I wanted to share. I thought you guys would love this. I was Googling, just kind of preparing for the show today and just kind of searching on Mykell Williams. There was one tweet that I loved that literally said, Georgia edge, Mykell Williams, 6'5", 265, lengthy frame, violent hands, NFL-ready run defender, asset on twists, stunts, moving to obviously outside linebacker, turned just 20 years old. I mean, it's absolutely crazy.
I'm telling you, but when you say 6'5", 265, if I'm an NFL scout, I'm sitting here salivating. And I haven't even watched film yet. 6'5", 265 is the perfect edge rusher. Like, you know what I'm saying? The length and, and the ability to be able to get your hands on people and get off blocks and disengage and stuff like that. That is the perfect that is the prototype. I am the prototype. Like Dowser said, like it is so cool and interesting, when you start getting to the minutia of this thing, right? But when you look at Mykell Williams, it's almost like he was created out of a mold, right? He broke the mold of what an outside linebacker / edge guy is supposed to look like. So this could be very interesting this year. Sure.
I think so too. Now, BG, I'll give you guys a little bit of a challenge, though. As good as Mykell Williams is, as much as we all agree that this is likely the best defensive front in the nation, what will it take for this particular front 7 to rise to the level of the one that led this team, this program, to back-to-back national championships?
It's to get those sack numbers up. It's to get those numbers back up to where they were. I mean, run stop, stuff in the run, it's going to be no issue for this team. It's something they've been good about, although they weren't as elite last year as they've been in years past with that too. I think that gets back to where it is in terms of being right on top of the country. And listen, as much as we praise Mykell Williams and the prototype in 6'5", 265 and going to be a top 10 pick, and we believe in all of that, we still need to see him production-wise be that consistent performer week in and week out. So I think it starts and ends with him getting after the quarterback, letting everybody else being able to do what they're going to do. And there's other guys that can get after the quarterback, but collectively for this team to get to where they were a couple years ago and to have this defense be where it is, it needs to be getting after the quarterback and actually bringing them to the ground, not QB hurries, even though that's a good stat and it is important, but actually bringing them to the ground and getting those quarterback sack numbers up.
Yeah, I think that second level is important too. You talk about a guy like C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson, and Shmuel Munden, who seems to be forgotten about from time to time, and also Jalen Walker as well, because he's going to be working on that inside linebacker spot. Like we talked about last week. So it is. I feel like that connectivity with that group is going to be very key. Communication, obviously, when those guys have young, and Kirby kind of talked about. Those guys really need to take it to the next level of their development because they got so much playing time last year and they're not quite where they need to be. And I just raising the standard, right? Kirby, those guys came in, hey, they were running around there making plays, but there were some times last year where they looked like young linebackers, right? They would run around with like a chicken with their head cut off, and you couldn't understand. They didn't quite know what was going on because everything is coming at them so fast. So I think that, those guys taking that next step, having that connectivity, having that, I know where you're supposed to be, you know where I'm supposed to be. If we're looking at each other like, hey man, what's going on? They know there's a problem. So I really feel like that growth, not only in the front in the defensive line, like BG talked about, but I think that connectivity and that taking that next step in their development for the linebacker core, I feel like that's going to be something that could really get them to that next level.
So did any dogs make the all transfer portal team? We'll go between the hedges to discuss. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by LinkedIn. So when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find qualified professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It's not just a job board. It really helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the right place. If not, not so much. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours, and you can hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. And listen, LinkedIn knows small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire, so they're constantly finding ways to make the process easier, like helping you to write job descriptions. And it must work because 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. And don't forget, when you're hiring for your small business, check out LinkedIn Jobs. So guys, as we know, it is still list season, if you will. So On3.com recently released its annual all transfer portal team. The offensive depth chart has 11 starters plus a backup tailback. And then the defensive depth chart, he kind of went with the 3-4, but he did add a 5th DB. And of course, he mentioned special teams as well. So I wanted to ask you guys about some current dogs and some former SEC standouts that made the cut for the all transfer portal team. So BG, on offense, I'll give you all 5, but you tell me kind of the 2 that stood out for you and why you think they were a good look for the all transfer portal team. Obviously, at the top of the list is running back Trevor Etienne, who of course transferred from Florida to Georgia, and Quinshawn Judkins, who went from Ole Miss and now to Ohio State. So parted ways with the SEC to the Big Ten. But you also have wide receivers CJ Daniels, Liberty to LSU, Deion Burks, Purdue to Oklahoma, offensive tackle Caden Proctor, Alabama to Iowa, back to Alabama, and Zaylen's Hurd from LSU to Tennessee. OG Caden Green, who went from Oklahoma to Missouri. So, then we wrap up with center Parker Brailsford, who went from Washington to Alabama.
Yeah, no, the crazy thing about this list is like how good these players are that are on this whole transfer team.
Yeah.
Like this is something that could be like an all SEC third team, when you look at it or something like that. Like it's crazy that it even exists. I laughed when you guys sent it, all transfer portal team. Like it's just another thing now that we look at where it's like all conference. All American, all transfer. Like, it's so normal, right? We just accept that this is like a normal thing. It's not real. It's made up. But I think the 2 people I'll highlight are CJ Daniels, the wide receiver going to LSU. He's outstanding, right? And LSU is just an absolute factory when it comes to wide receivers. Yeah, Malik Neighbors drafted in the top 10 this year. Everybody knows about Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and a number of other wideouts that they put in the league over the last handful of years. And they decided, hey, we don't have that guy necessarily, or a guy that's ready to be that now. And they're so used to having it there. It's been an embarrassment of riches at that position for them. So CJ Daniels moving over from Liberty, very, very productive player. He's going to have a huge impact there at LSU. And then I'm going to go to the offensive line and the center, Parker Brailsford, going from Washington to Bama. He was a starter there at Washington, really anchored that offensive line. And it's a continuity thing. I know he's going, from Washington and he's playing with a new quarterback, but it's going to be in that same offensive system. Some of the coaching staff is going to be overlapped. So I think that's really important when you have so much change. Okay, if we can bring our center over here who really understands the game at a high level, who graded out at a very high level last year too. That's going to be really nice for their offense to be able to get going. And to have it at ease, just so many different moving parts. So I think CJ Daniels and Parker Brailsford wind up having the biggest impact.
I think one of the things to kind of add to what you're saying, BG, I feel like, Caden Proctor, going to transferring from Alabama, like you said, this list is a lot. They're really good players on this list. Like, I remember transfer guys, it was always something wrong with them. When I was in college, we look at transfers like, hey, man, what's wrong with you? Why are you here? Or who kicked you? You know what I'm saying? So just for guys that have had success at these schools to be on this list is just so crazy to me. But I think that Kalen DeBoer is onto something, right? You bring your center over, you get Caden Proctor, who got on Iowa's campus and was like, you know what? I think we'll go back. Let's go back to Alabama. Maybe home is not such a good idea. So from that standpoint, to see him having two offensive linemen on this list is very, very interesting, right? And then also the other one that really stands out to me is Quinshon Judkins, because you got Travion Henderson up there who is all worldly, from Ole Miss to make that jump to Ohio State is kind of interesting. I'm like, okay, why would you trying to do a whole 1-2 back type NFL pro style type thing? That's what they're trying to sell to you. So I thought that was kind of interesting, the one that stood out to me. But yeah, I think overall, obviously, Trevor Etienne is going to do what he does. But I think that with what Kalen DeBoer was able to do to get these two offensive linemen, when you start talking about solidifying that front, that offensive line, to be able to protect that quarterback regardless of who he is, right? I know, Michael Penix Jr. and Jalen Milroe are two totally different guys, but when you got guys that are solid and have had success playing on the college football level, right? I feel like this is something that a nice little power play for Kalen DeBoer for sure.
Yeah. And the Quinshon Judkins thing, it's so interesting because, how good he was last year, how productive he was last year. And it's weird in the sense of Ole Miss has a chance to actually take over, this year, in the sense like they could be in the SEC championship. This is all right. Bama's finally, Saban's gone. We got people transferring out. We have all the pieces we need. I know we'll probably talk about a couple of the defensive players here too, related to Ole Miss in just a minute, but what they've got and their roster and everything, it's just weird to see him jet. Now we know why that is, because Ohio State has one of the bigger bags out there to share. So he got a little piece of that, and good for him. It's just like, man, this is a chance that Ole Miss has to go in and make this happen. And then he bounced. So it's unfortunate to see. And but I do wish him well at Ohio State.
Indeed. Now let's switch over to the defensive side. I'll give you guys the all transfer portal team on that side of the ball. And JD, tell me maybe a couple that stood out to you and maybe the same for you, BG. So linebacker Jamon Dumas-Johnson, of course, going from Georgia to Kentucky. Corner AJ Harris going from Georgia to Penn State. Defensive end Nick Skirleton, Purdue to Texas A&M. D-tackle Walter Nolan, Texas A&M to Ole Miss. Edge Princely Umanmielen, Florida to Ole Miss. And Trey Moore from UT San Antonio to Texas. Nickel Earl Little, Alabama to Florida State. And safety Caleb Downs, Alabama to Ohio State.
Yeah, I have to go with Jamon Dumas-Johnson about what he was able to bring to the table. You understood that the Dogs kind of felt when he left, because we talked about CJ Allen and Raylan Wilson, those guys getting opportunities. Well, the reason why they got opportunities is because he got hurt, and you saw how those guys performed once they got on the field. And Jamon was like, "Hey man, let me get up out of here. Let me go to Kentucky over here in the SEC, and I can stay in the SEC and kind of do my thing." I think that's going to have a bigger impact than most people think, because then also you get Brock Vandagriff as well. Kind of shocked that he's not. I mean, I know Dylan Gabriel ridiculous numbers, but when you talk about potential and solidifying a school, because once you get that quarterback in there, that can change. That can be a game changer for you. And we know how solid Kentucky has been without necessarily a headliner at that quarterback spot. So for them to kind of pull those two, I feel like that can be something that can work out really well for the Wildcats.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we get to see that. I believe it's the third week, right? It's Georgia at Kentucky up there, and it's going to be a night game and all that stuff. So you'll kind of see where Kentucky's at, and all the stories are going to be the backup, and Dumas-Johnson losing the starting spot and that whole thing. But the two names I want to highlight, Walter Nolan. If you don't know who he is, you should probably learn the name. If you are just maybe a Georgia fan and don't get out in the rest of the SEC, he's got an outside chance to be in the number one overall pick. Like we talk about Mykell Williams, like Walter Nolan, like he is the real deal. And that was a transfer pickup, that we just mentioned. Ole Miss losing Quinshon Judkins, but getting a guy like Walter Nolan and really shoring up this defense. He's a terrific player, and he's also going to have the chance to highlight himself in some massive games this year. So that's going to be great. The other one for me is Caleb Downs, right? We thought he was coming to Georgia, Bama product, had a ton of playing time in his first year. Really just an excellent football player all around. Ohio State got an absolute gem in that one. And a lot of people would pick Ohio State or Oregon to wind up winning the Big Ten. So he's going to be right there in the mix, starting from day one, going to be a leader on that defense. And he's going to have massive impact there for the Buckeyes.
Indeed. And speaking of massive impact, the All-SEC first team for Athlon was released Sunday. Who made it from the Dogs team? Who got snubbed? We'll talk about it in Next Up. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. Summertime, which is just a couple days away officially, means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more. And you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park, or at least if you bet Jaylen Brown as the Finals MVP, you might have taken the bag home. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. Now, the NHL finals are still going on. The final to win that Stanley Cup, to hoist Lord Stanley's Cup. Will Connor McDavid be able to will the Edmonton Oilers into another game? They're back in Florida to play Game 5, I think it is. And that could be the case. Or the Florida Panthers, after getting blown out 8-1 a couple nights ago, might say, you know what, it's time to make this a wrap. So we shall see. Betting odds are still for Connor McDavid to be the MVP. So check it out on FanDuel. And of course, locally here, we have Marcelo Zuna, who's right there with Shohei Ohtani as far as NL MVP, All-Star votes, etc. Check out FanDuel for where we stand on Home Run King, National League and American League for this upcoming season. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, guys, so let's go back to one more list, which we thought was interesting because it's not so much, Jarvis, that we were shocked by who made the list. Athlon's All-SEC first team that they released late Sunday: Carson Beck, Trevor Etienne, Mykell Williams, Malachi Starks, and Tate Ratledge. But I'll ask you this. Did any dog get snubbed on that list? And of course, let me know your thoughts on those 5 as well. But again, I think those were probably Captain Obvious.
Oh, yeah, for sure. When you think about, what those guys bring to the table, Tate Ratledge obviously could have gone to the NFL, but he just chose to come back. And I know Michael Morris was probably like, hey, man, go on, get out of here so I can get my starting spot. So, with Dylan Fairchild, because, both of those guys did an excellent job. And I really feel like if you, being that those guys kind of split those reps, that it was kind of hard to put those guys in that all SEC or all anything conversation because they aren't starters, right? And we know that Kirby doesn't have any issues with having those offensive linemen rotate. We know that those guys mostly played the whole game. Like 99% of those guys played the whole game. So I feel like, but Tate Ratledge is a guy that I feel like he definitely deserves to be on there because he's, like you said, that wily veteran that you need to have to solidify that front because, with the new center coming in, and taking over for Van Pran-Ganger, those are the things that you need. You need to have those veteran guys on that offensive line. And I feel like the names, like you said, there aren't any that are on there. I'm like, oh, kind of surprised. But yeah, these are the ones that should have been on this list for sure.
Yeah.
Did you feel a snub, Jarvis? Like anyone else should be on the list?
Well, to be honest with you, no, because if the first name that came to mind was Dominic Lovett, like I feel like he didn't really necessarily put up the numbers needed to be on there. When you have these people making these lists, now granted, I would not be surprised if he's on this all SEC team or one of them at the end
Yeah.
of the year, because I feel like he was my breakout guy for this offense from a wide receiver standpoint. But yeah, that's the only one I can really think of that probably deserves to be on there, but doesn't necessarily have the stats to back it up.
And BG, Athlon also did an extension of this list where they had their projected all SEC first team offense and all SEC first team defense. So to Jarvis's point, Dominic Lovett was definitely on that list. So yeah, like you said, when you expand the list and kind of go position by position, then you'll see more of those dogs really just dominate the list on both sides of the ball. But for you, were there any shockers who made the list? Were there any shockers for some who may have gotten snubbed?
Yeah, I think when we talk about what we started the show off with, right, this front seven being the number one in the country, and there's only one player from the front seven that is a part of this group, right? It's Mykell Williams. I think when the season's over, it's going to be like, all right, which one of the linebackers do we pick in addition to Mykell Williams? Like, is it one? Is it all of them? You know, I think it winds up being CJ Allen, and he just didn't play enough last year, like in terms of volume and the production to be able to be named you know, on that preseason first team. But I think when you look back at the end of the year, it's gonna be like, oh my gosh, you know, he's probably the best linebacker in the country, or right in that short conversation of one of 2, 3, 4 guys. So I think between CJ Allen or even Shmuel Munden, like, and we just said too, who's almost like being looked over at this point, which is crazy. And he, by the way, he will love that. He already is a player who plays with a chip on his shoulder and has attitude about him, which I love at linebacker. But I think this is gonna, like, stuff like this is gonna rub him even more. He's hearing about everybody else and everybody else's potential and everything. So I think one of these linebackers, if not both of them, are gonna wind up and should be on this team by the season's end.
Indeed. And it's interesting that you mentioned that because, like I said, Dominic Lovett was on that all SEC offense, first team offense that Athlon kind of put together that had a boatload of dogs on it. And CJ Allen was on that list as well. So like I said, and actually Shmuel Munden was on that list too. So obviously, like you said, when you begin to expand the list and you think about the fact that On Three put both of them in because of the defensive front of the front seven, then it kind of makes sense that they would be on that side of the list as well. Now, real quick, I wanted to ask you guys about this because my, like, there's history and we're accustomed to Georgia making history, but usually it's making history in the draft itself or it's making history in the NFL season. This one on Monday night, former Georgia Bulldog wide receiver Ladd McConkey got a historic rookie contract with the Los Angeles Chargers in the middle of like OTAs for all intents and purposes, just kind of like out of the blue. But man, listen, McConkey signed a 4-year deal, with the most guaranteed money for the number 34 pick in NFL history. And I think that just speaks such volumes because I think when he was drafted, there were some people that felt like he should have been drafted earlier, some that felt like he should have been drafted later, some that were like, oh no, that was a good look and a good pick for the Chargers. But yeah, I think that shows you so much about what Jim Harbaugh has in store for him and the confidence he has in him for what he can bring to this team.
Yeah, I think he just has a plan. Like when you think about, coming off the college, run, winning the national championship, Jim Harbaugh has that mindset of what kind of guys can I bring in here to change the mindset? Because we know the Chargers have been just so mid for the past 20 years. Forever, they've been so mid, right? So I think that when you think about changing that culture, you bring guys in who are used to winning, who understands about, hey, I'm gonna do whatever it takes. Ladd even talked about this when I remember when he was talking at the NFL Combine when I was up in Indy. He was talking about how I'm willing to play special teams, wide receiver X, Y, Z. It doesn't matter. I'll play whatever. I just want to be able to play and contribute because I know what I bring to the table. My biggest asset is my versatility, being able to do multiple things. I'm not the biggest guy. I'm not necessarily the fastest guy, but I can do a lot of things really, really well. And I think Jim Harbaugh understood that, and that's why they They want to make sure he's happy. And to be honest with you, like this is great for Ladd because he's going to be able to cash another big check before, as everything works out. He's going to cash another big check before those wide receivers in the first round because they got that 5th year option. And Ladd can sit around saying, hey, man, I'm be negotiating my contract while y'all in that 5th year.
Yeah. But nice life if you got it, right?
Absolutely.
100%. It was nice to see, that he got the most guaranteed money, like you mentioned, Tenitra, for that spot. I think it's also important, too, just because, given his injury history, right? He's had the back issues. He's had some other soft tissue injuries. And so it's something that he's probably going to deal with throughout his career. I think he winds up having a nice NFL career, but you never know. I mean, every player is always 1 or 2 injuries away from it being done. So the fact that he was able to shore up that guaranteed money is important. But like Jarvis was saying, he's going to be in such a good spot, and he's going to he's going to have an opportunity to lead this team in targets as a rookie. I mean, someone has to do it, right? So Quentin Johnson is obviously a developmental wide receiver who was a 1st-round pick last year, the bigger guy at a TCU, and maybe he takes the next step. But I know Ladd's been working a lot in the slot out there in LA under that system too, and I think he wound up being a really nice possession receiver because the other thing is Keenan Allen's gone from that offense too, so there's a ton of targets. As is Mykell Williams, who would be there for a month and then not for the next month, but all those targets have been vacated out there, and they got to go somewhere. And Ladd's going to be one of the top options for them from a very, very early stage. So I'm interested to see out of the gate how much run he gets.
Indeed, how much run he gets for an amazing rookie deal that saw him get $9.9 million, which tops what Sam Laporta got at that same position with a $4.089 million signing bonus. But the important piece of that is most of that money is guaranteed. So you love to see it for Ladd McConkey. Thanks for stopping by the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we're free and available wherever you download your podcasts. We'll see you on the Atlanta Sports Party Thursday.